When I first scratched that lottery ticket and saw the numbers line up, I thought my heart had stopped. Millions of dollars sat there in my hands, and for a moment I imagined all the things I could do, all the ways I could change my life, and maybe even change the lives of the people around me. But then a darker thought crept in. What would my family, my co-workers, and even my closest friends do if they knew? I had lived long enough to see how people treat you when they think you're struggling, and how they treat you when they think you're useful. I wasn't about to hand over my good fortune to a crowd of entitled people who had already shown me where I stood in their lives. So I made a choice that most people would call cruel or selfish, but I called it survival. I didn't tell anyone. Not a single soul. Instead, I decided to live my life as if nothing had changed, to carry myself as the same struggling worker with the same bills, the same stress, and the same insecurities, while secretly knowing I had an escape plan tucked away in my pocket. At work, the situation had been spiraling long before I ever touched that lottery ticket. My boss, a man who liked to remind everyone that he built this company from the ground up, treated employees like disposable tools. If you didn't work overtime, if you didn't answer emails at midnight, if you dared to take a sick day, you were automatically seen as disloyal, lazy, and undeserving of even the scraps of respect he pretended to hand out. I had been there 5 years, pouring in my energy, cleaning up the messes of coworkers who somehow kept their jobs despite being disasters, and watching promotions go to people who played golf with him rather than people who earned it. It was a workplace built on favoritism and fake loyalty, and I was right in the middle of it, too tired to leave and too stubborn to quit. The lottery gave me a way out, but I wasn't going to storm off in anger. No, I was going to let them show me their true faces, and then I would decide what they deserved. The first test came from my own family. I asked my brother for a small loan, just a few $100s to cover some bills. I knew he had it, because he had bragged about his savings during our last family dinner. But the second the words left my mouth, his whole demeanor shifted. He looked at me with disgust, like I was some kind of parasite, and told me I needed to learn responsibility instead of looking for handouts. This was the same brother who had asked me for help 2 years ago when he wanted to move apartments, and I had given him not just money but time, carrying furniture and sweating in the summer heat until his new place was ready. He hadn't even remembered that, or maybe he had and just didn't care. That was when I realized this was going to be easier than I thought. People reveal themselves quickly when they think you're beneath them. Next came my parents. I thought maybe they would at least offer compassion. I framed it carefully, telling them I was struggling to pay rent, that the job wasn't enough, that I felt like I was drowning. My mother frowned and told me maybe I should cut back on luxuries, as if I was secretly living like a millionaire while counting pennies. My father said I was just being dramatic, that everyone struggles, and if I couldn't handle it, then maybe I wasn't strong enough for adulthood. Hearing that stung, because I had spent years helping them with errands, fixing things in their house, and even slipping them money when their car broke down. None of it mattered. In their eyes, the moment I was vulnerable, I wasn't their child, I was a disappointment. But nothing compared to the betrayal that came from the woman I thought I would marry. We had been together for 3 years, and though we weren't perfect, I believed we had loyalty, that we had trust. I tested her the same way I tested everyone else, telling her that rent was hard, bills were piling up, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up. Instead of empathy, she sighed and said maybe it was time to reevaluate things, because she couldn't tie her future to someone who might drag her down. I didn't even have to dig deeper. The very next week, I found out she had been messaging one of our coworkers behind my back, talking about how she deserved someone more stable and how she felt wasted in our relationship. It was like all the pieces fell into place at once. The family who looked down on me, the workplace that treated me like a cog, the partner who saw me as disposable, it was all the same disease. Entitlement. Selfishness. People who wanted the benefits of my hard work without ever standing beside me when I was low. The thing about sudden wealth is that it doesn't change who you are, it just removes the mask from everyone around you. I watched as the masks crumbled, one by one, while I kept my secret tucked away. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every betrayal became fuel for what I was planning. I wouldn't lash out blindly, and I wouldn't scream my truth in their faces. No, I was going to craft something better. A story that would leave them speechless, a reckoning they wouldn't forget, and a comeback that would silence every whisper that I wasn't good enough. They had shown me their true colors, and now it was time for me to show them mine. The days that followed felt like I was living in two parallel realities. Outwardly, I was the same exhausted employee dragging myself into the office, the same family member quietly listening at dinners, the same partner pretending not to notice the shift in her tone whenever she spoke to me. Inwardly, though, I was counting every crack in their facades, every word they didn't realize they were giving away. With the lottery money tucked safely away in a private account, I knew I could disappear whenever I wanted, but that would have been too merciful. Walking away quietly would have meant they never faced the truth of how they treated me, never realized the price of their greed and betrayal. No, I wanted them to see, to feel it, to choke on the realization that they had burned bridges that could have changed everything for them. Work was the perfect stage to start. My boss had always kept me on a short leash, the kind where he dangled the idea of advancement but never let me climb high enough to grab it. That month he called me into his office with his smug half-smile, the one he used when he thought he had total control. He told me the company was tightening budgets and that my yearly raise would be postponed indefinitely. I almost laughed in his face, because I knew exactly how much money he'd spent on his weekend golf trip. He bragged about it to the whole staff. But I didn't argue. I nodded, thanked him for his generosity, and walked out like a man who had nothing left to lose. That was when the idea started forming in my head. What if I didn't just walk away from the company? What if I bought the silence out from under him, created something that would expose everything he'd buried? The thought stuck like a splinter, and I couldn't shake it home. The situation with my girlfriend deteriorated faster than I could have imagined. She had stopped making an effort entirely, always working late or too tired to talk. I knew what that meant. The proof came one evening when she left her phone on the couch while she showered. I hadn't planned to look, but when her screen lit up, the preview was impossible to ignore. Messages from my coworker. They weren't just casual either, they were dripping with intimacy, plans for weekends together, comments about me like I was already out of the picture. I sat there staring at the words until the rage burned out of me, replaced by something colder. I could have confronted her then and there, but why give her the satisfaction? Why let her control the ending when I held all the cards? I put her phone back exactly where she left it, smiled when she came out of the bathroom, and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. Sometimes silence is sharper than any weapon. Family, too, seemed determined to show me how little I mattered. My parents continued their lectures about responsibility, about how maybe if I worked harder I wouldn't always be struggling. My brother started bragging more openly, showing off his new purchases while smirking at me as if he enjoyed watching me squirm. And I let them, because every jab, every sneer, every reminder that they thought I was beneath them was another nail in the coffin of their future relationship with me. They didn't realize that the person they were dismissing was the same one who could have erased every debt they had, who could have made their lives easier with a single signature. They didn't know, and they didn't deserve to. Meanwhile, I started laying the groundwork for my revenge. Quietly, without a word, I began transferring parts of my winnings into investments under a separate identity. I contacted lawyers discreetly, people who could draft airtight contracts and create shells that would keep me protected. I learned quickly that money wasn't just power, it was a weapon, and I was learning how to wield it. I wasn't going to waste it on flashy cars or vacations, not yet. I was going to build a foundation strong enough to crush the people who thought I was weak. The breaking point with my girlfriend came when she'd accidentally mentioned how she'd been talking with my coworker about moving in together someday. She said it casually, as though planting a seed, watching my reaction. I smiled, nodded, and told her I understood. Inside, I was already planning the day I would vanish from her life without a trace. I would let her believe she had traded up, let her soak in the satisfaction of thinking she had left me behind for someone better, and then I would make sure the truth landed on her like a thunderclap. She thought she was walking into a new life. She had no idea she was walking into a carefully timed collapse. At the office, I began to gather evidence. Years of mistreatment weren't hard to document once I paid attention. Emails where the boss berated employees, spreadsheets showing money shuffled around to cover personal expenses, projects given to his favorites that never met deadlines. I copied everything quietly, stored it in places he could never reach, and built a file that could burn the whole company to the ground. Every morning when I walked past him, pretending to be tired and defeated, I felt the weight of that file in my pocket like a secret weapon. He had no idea the man he dismissed as disposable was the same man preparing to dismantle his empire piece by piece. By now, I had stopped looking at my family and coworkers with the same bitterness I once had. It wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. They weren't just unkind, they were entitled, selfish, and blind to their own arrogance. They believed the world owed them, and when I didn't hand it over, they cast me aside. That realization gave me freedom. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their acceptance. What I needed was patience, and patience I had in abundance now. So I played my role to perfection. At dinners, I nodded at their stories and laughed at their jokes, even when they mocked me. At work, I stayed late and finished reports, even when I knew my boss would never give me credit. At home, I kissed my girlfriend goodnight and wished her sweet dreams, even as she texted another man under the covers. Every gesture, every smile, every moment of pretending was another step closer to the day I would stop pretending altogether. The test was over, and everyone had failed. Soon it would be time to reveal the answers, and when that day came, they wouldn't just regret their choices, they would never recover from them. The day everything began to unravel wasn't planned, at least not in the sense of choosing a date on a calendar. It was more like fate handed me the opportunity I'd been waiting for, and I simply chose not to waste it. It started at work when my boss called an emergency meeting. He stood at the front of the conference room, puffed up like a man about to deliver a sermon, and told us the company was in financial distress. Effective immediately, bonuses would be cancelled, overtime would be mandatory, and anyone unwilling to comply should consider other options. Around me, I saw faces drop, coworkers shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some even whispering to each other. He thrived on this power, this ability to crush people's spirits in one breath. But what he didn't know was that I had already secured every piece of evidence I needed to show where the money had really gone: vacation homes, expensive trips, golf memberships, and personal luxuries that had nothing to do with the company's survival. I sat there quietly, staring at him, imagining the look on his face when the truth finally came crashing down. That evening, while everyone else went home deflated, I stayed late under the guise of finishing reports. Instead, I uploaded the file I had built for weeks, every damning detail neatly arranged, into an anonymous package sent to the board of directors and a handful of investigative journalists. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a confrontation, it was a quiet bomb ticking in the background, and soon he would hear it go off. I left the office with a smile I hadn't worn in years, the kind of smile that comes from knowing you've already won. At home, the unraveling took a more personal turn. My girlfriend had been growing bolder with her secrecy, staying out later, showering the second she got home, and leaving her phone face down on the table. That night she walked in smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't hers, humming to herself like she was in love. I didn't confront her. Instead, I told her I'd been thinking about our future, that maybe we should take a break so she could figure out what she really wanted. Her eyes lit up in a way that betrayed everything: relief, excitement, even triumph. She didn't fight it. She agreed almost too quickly, as though she had been waiting for me to let her off the hook so she could run into someone else's arms without guilt. I kissed her cheek, wished her well, and watched as she packed her things with an eagerness that made me sick. She thought she was free, thought she had won, but I knew the truth. What she had run to wasn't stability, it was another man who had no idea what kind of person she truly was. And one day, she'd show him the same face she had shown me. The real twist came 2 weeks later when my family called me in a panic. My brother had made a risky investment that went south, and he was suddenly in debt larger than anything he had ever faced. He came to me, voice shaky, asking if I could help out just this once. I remembered the look on his face when I had asked for a fraction of that amount, the way he had sneered and told me to learn responsibility. Now he was the one desperate, and I had the power to turn him away with the same coldness he had shown me. My parents chimed in too, trying to guilt me, saying family should always stick together, that this was the time to step up. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Where was that loyalty when I had asked for their support? Where was that sense of family when I was drowning and they shrugged it off? I told them simply that I couldn't, that I was struggling just like before, and that maybe they should learn responsibility. The silence on the other end of the line was more satisfying than any victory speech could have been. Then came the explosion at work. News broke that my boss was under investigation for embezzlement, that the company's financial distress had been manufactured by his greed. The emails, the spreadsheets, the documents I had sent out painted a picture so clear that even his closest allies couldn't defend him. He was escorted out of the building in front of everyone, his smug smile replaced with a pale, trembling face. Coworkers whispered in shock, some even cheering quietly under their breath. No one knew who had exposed him, but I didn't need the credit. Watching him fall was enough. He had spent years stepping on people to climb higher, and now he had nothing left to stand on. As for my ex, I heard through mutual friends that her shiny new relationship with my coworker had already begun to sour. Apparently, he wasn't the knight in shining armor she thought he was. He bragged openly about their relationship, parading her around like a trophy, and she hated it. The same qualities that had drawn her to him, the attention, the thrill, were already turning into chains. It was poetic justice, watching her trade loyalty for excitement and end up trapped in a cage of her own making. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything at all. She had made her choice, and she could live with it. By then, I had begun quietly building my own company, funded by the winnings no one knew I had. I hired a small team of people I trusted, people who had been overlooked and mistreated by my old boss. We worked in secret, building something real while the ruins of my old workplace still smoldered. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about proving that I could create something better, something built on respect and loyalty instead of greed and manipulation. And with every step forward, I felt lighter, freer, like I was finally stepping into the life I was meant to have. The best part was knowing that none of the people who had betrayed me would ever see it coming. To them, I was still the same struggling man, the one who couldn't catch a break, the one they dismissed without a second thought. They didn't know that I was sitting on millions, that I had already rebuilt myself from the ground up, that their cruelty had only fueled my rise. They thought they had left me behind. In reality, I was already miles ahead.